My roommate Callum said, "You don't have that kind of money," so I projected $297,000 of receipts on the wall, every dollar I spent to fund their careers. My other roommate Morgan just sat down and cried. Lena's laugh rang through the back patio, echoing against the mountains like a bell. She had her wine glass in one hand and was dangling a cigarette from the other, her voice rising above the rest. "Seriously, has Zara ever finished a single piece since she moved in?" Someone snorted. "You mean besides those depressing black line tattoos she scratches into people with that ancient gun?" I stood near the screen door, half in the kitchen, half out, listening, even though I knew I shouldn't. I could feel the cheap vinyl of my thrift store boots sticking to the floor. My hoodie still had ink stains down the sleeve. And somewhere inside, I wished I could disappear. "My name's Zara. I'm 31. I live in a little mountain town in Colorado, the kind that's too far from Denver to matter but close enough for weekenders to ruin the rent. I'm a tattoo artist. Or at least I used to be. These days, I'm more of a secret banker. Arlo, my mentor, died 5 years ago. He was gruff, brilliant, and never left this place. When he passed, he left behind a crumbling studio and a modest trust fund for local artists. Everyone thought the fund was managed by some silent donor or maybe a nonprofit. But really? It's me. Every cent that's kept this shabby little artist collective afloat has passed through my hands. The rent, the heat, the imported paper Morgan insists on using for her collages, the plane tickets to art fairs Callum and Lena can't afford. It's all me. Arlo left the framework, and I filled it in with my own savings, my own gigs. And they think I'm just here because I can't make it anywhere else. Morgan brushed past me in the kitchen, pulling open the fridge without a glance. "Do we have oat milk or just whatever budget crap Zara buys?" "Probably expired, either way," Rai added, digging through a box of vegan crackers on the counter. I didn't say anything. I just took a slow sip from my chipped mug and stepped back out onto the patio with them. The night was cool. The string lights above us flickered slightly, probably another bad bulb. I made a mental note to replace it tomorrow. They didn't even pause when I joined them, like I was background noise, part of the furniture. Callum leaned into Lena, murmuring something. She laughed and swatted his arm. "Stop. She'll hear you." Then louder, "Zara, you gonna show anything at the Winter Gallery this year?" I met her eyes. "Probably not." She smiled like that confirmed whatever joke they'd just made. "Well, we'll save you a seat in the back row." That one stung a little more than it should have. I had no one to blame but myself. I let this happen. I let them think I was just some aimless hanger-on, tagging along while they made real art. And every month, I covered their lives like a ghost in the walls. 5 years of it. And tonight, for the first time, it felt heavy. The gallery was packed, and for once, it didn't smell like turpentine and dust. They'd lit candles, put up soft hanging lights, and even rented one of those silent jazz trios that probably cost a fortune. But the real show was the wall, a curated exhibit called Arlo's Legacy, dedicated to the man who gave us everything. Well, kind of. I stood near the back, next to a crooked plant someone had clearly shoved there last minute to hide the fire extinguisher. My boots stuck to the floor again. No one noticed. No one ever did. Lena stood center stage with a glass of white wine that matched her ivory blazer. She cleared her throat and tapped a spoon against her glass like she was the goddamn matriarch of the mountain art scene. "I just want to say," she began, voice warm and buttery, "this show wouldn't be possible without the support of someone very special." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. "A generous mystery benefactor, who has, year after year, kept Arlo's memory alive through quiet donations, studio renovations, and exhibition funding." Morgan gave a dramatic little gasp. "It's so wild that we still don't know who they are." I knew. Of course I did, but I just stood there, quiet, sipping a flat ginger ale because no one had thought to bring a non-alcoholic option for the girl who hadn't had a drink in 4 years. "They believed in this community," Lena went on, hand fluttering to her chest like a politician. "And without them, we wouldn't be standing here." Applause again. A few people wiped at their eyes. I didn't feel anything. After the speech, the real party began. Rai poured champagne like it was water. Morgan held court near the installation, pointing out her own mixed media piece and explaining it as if she hadn't whined for 3 weeks about not knowing what to make. Callum played DJ from his phone, spinning some obscure French electro that he swore was Arlo's favorite. No one said a word to me. I leaned against the gallery's chipped radiator, staring at the floor tiles. They hadn't been replaced since Arlo died. I paid for that tile quote twice. But every time, the group voted to fund something else. A print residency in Oregon. A kiln nobody knew how to use. Across the room, I caught Lena laughing, the tilted head, teeth showing kind that always meant someone was being roasted. "Did you see Zara's table at the market last weekend?" she said, not even bothering to whisper. Her signage was duct tape and a napkin. "I thought it was performance art." Callum added, "Someone should gift her a grant for clothes that aren't from a dumpster." Rai barked out a laugh. "I think even the dumpster would pass." My chest went still. Not tight. Not angry. Just still. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just watched the three of them toast their wine glasses like they'd earned the right to mock me. Like they weren't living in Arlo's house, using Arlo's tools, funded by Arlo's trust, through me. That was the moment something shifted. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. Let them have their wine and speeches and curated bios. I'd given 5 years. I had nothing left to give. And soon, they'd know it. My apartment sat above an old bakery that never opened before 10 and always smelled like burnt sugar. Normally, that was comforting. Tonight, it made me nauseous. I dropped my bag by the door and walked straight to my tiny desk in the corner. The lamp buzzed weakly when I flicked it on. I stared at the laptop sitting there like it was a loaded weapon. The Arlo Fund. I hadn't opened the dashboard in weeks. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what it would say. Still, I clicked in. The homepage greeted me like always. Simple, sterile. The logo Lena had designed 5 years ago was still there, a hand-drawn brushstroke circle around Arlo's initials. They all loved it, called it humble, but intentional. I remember thinking it looked like the loading icon on my email app. I clicked into the records. First tab, rent subsidies, every studio lease in the building covered in full. $1,800 a month, split 4 ways. None of them had ever asked where the money came from. They just assumed someone else was footing the bill. Probably thought it was some old donor Arlo charmed back in the 90s. Second tab, travel and residencies, flights to New York for Lena's solo show. Callum's train to a poetry retreat in Vermont. Rai's artist sabbatical to Santa Fe, where he mostly just posted shirtless selfies next to cacti. Third tab, supplies, endless invoices for custom frames, oil pastels from Japan, hand-mixed glazes for pottery. Meanwhile, I was still using second-hand needles and black market ink cartridges I bartered for online. Last tab, transfers, my own deposits, every month. From my checking to the fund. Quiet, steady, no one ever noticed. Total expenses since Arlo's death, $297,432.11. I stared at the number. It didn't look real. It looked like a lottery jackpot or a hospital bill. Nearly 300 grand, my entire savings. Every bonus from my private tattoo clients. Every side hustle, every commission I forced myself to take even when my hands were shaking from exhaustion. All to support a group of people who thought I was the joke in the room. I closed the laptop slowly. My hand hovered over the lid for a second before I pressed it shut. They called me broke, lazy, embarrassing. And maybe I had let that slide for too long. Maybe I had clung too tightly to the dream that Arlo's vision was still alive through them. But looking at those numbers, I knew the truth. I hadn't been part of the community. I had been the foundation they stood on, while pretending I wasn't even in the room. That ends now. The next morning, I sat across from Raymond Jennings in his cramped office above the town's one real estate agency. He was Arlo's old legal advisor, retired now. Mostly, but still sharp in that terrifying, polite way only old lawyers can be. He looked up from the stack of paperwork I'd handed him and raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this, Zara?" I nodded, completely. He gave a low whistle and leaned back in his chair. "You know, Arlo never expected you to fund this thing personally." "I know. He left a structure," he said gently, "not an open drain." "Yeah, well," I said, forcing a smile, "they turned it into a fountain." Raymond didn't laugh. He just handed me a pen. It took maybe 20 minutes to sign everything. Dissolution documents, fund closure notices, paperwork to transfer what little remained, about 11 grand, into a new nonprofit account we'd set up together the week before, the Hollow Pine Arts Initiative. Its mission was simple: free community art classes for kids from the valley. No artists in residence. No press kits. No custom glazes from Kyoto. Just crayons, construction paper. Little fingers learning how to make something that didn't need to be perfect. As I stepped outside into the cold, bright air, the wind cut right through my hoodie. I tugged it tighter, stuffed the finalized documents in my backpack, and headed straight to the post office. Next stop, the studio. I slipped inside during the afternoon lull, when most of them were out, Morgan teaching a clay demo, Lena at her work lunch, Rai probably sleeping off whatever IPA he'd guzzled the night before. Callum was there, though, hunched over his laptop with headphones on. He didn't even look up when I walked past. I pinned 4 copies of the same notice on the bulletin board. Mandatory meeting, All residents are required to attend a funding update session. Friday, 6 p.m. Attendance required for continued access to shared resources. I made sure the wording sounded vague, official but mysterious. Let them stew on it. Then I did what I'd been waiting 5 years to do. I logged into the fund's payment system and hit pause all automatic disbursements. By the time I got home that evening, the bounce-back emails had already started. Payment failed, January rent, Lena. Payment failed, studio utilities, Callum. Payment failed, supplies order, Morgan. Each one was like a slow, satisfying exhale. They wouldn't see it coming. Not yet. But the ground was already shifting beneath their feet. She posted in the group thread Thursday morning. Anyone else having issues with the utilities? Water's out again? No one responded right away. Then Lena chimed in with a gif of a cartoon shrug, followed by, must be town crap again. The pipes are ancient. I didn't say anything. I just watched the messages roll in like popcorn. Later that afternoon, Rai sent a message in all caps. My rent bounced WTF. I set my phone face down and went back to sketching a flash sheet of roses I'd never tattoo on anyone. That evening, the text came. Lena, hey, can you come by the studio tomorrow night? Just us. We need to talk. No punctuation. No emoji. That was how I knew it was serious. I stared at it for a second, then typed, sure. Friday came fast. I spent most of the day at the shop, pretending to care about a walk-in who wanted a wolf paw print on his shoulder. By 5, I was drained, but also wired, like something inside me had been waiting for this exact moment to finally stop pretending. The sun dipped behind the mountains early, casting long shadows over the town. I walked to the studio with my hands in my pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. The windows glowed warm from inside. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. I stepped in, and every head turned. Callum was leaning against the back wall, arms crossed. Morgan sat on a stool with her knees pulled up to her chest. Rai paced like a caged animal. Lena stood near the center, right under the track lighting, like she was staging a scene in one of her performance pieces. The room was too quiet. Hey, I said, shutting the door behind me. Zara, Lena said, her voice stretched thin. We just want to figure out what's going on. With what? I asked, even though I knew exactly what. Callum cut in, his voice tense. The payments, rent, orders. Morgan's ceramics class got cancelled because the supplies didn't come. I didn't do anything, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Morgan looked up. But you know something, right? Like, do you know who the fund manager is? We thought maybe you had a contact. I let that hang in the air for a second, just long enough to watch their confidence start to crumble. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. Did something happen? Rai rolled his eyes. Come on, Zara. This isn't funny. Whoever that person is, they froze everything. And we need to fix it before the gallery show next month. Lena took a step toward me. Look, we're just asking. Do you know anything? I looked at each of them. Really looked. Their faces were drawn, tired, worried, waiting for someone to step in and make it all okay. I gave a slow nod. Yeah, I said. I know exactly what's going on. Lena tilted her head. Wait, what do you mean you know what's going on? I unzipped my backpack, pulled out my tablet, and walked past them without a word. My boots echoed on the hardwood as I crossed to the back wall, the one we used for projection during open studios, still covered in thumbtacked posters and faded flyers. I peeled one down. What are you doing? Callum asked, frowning. I plugged the tablet into the projector and tapped twice. The wall flickered, then lit up with a spreadsheet. Rows and rows of numbers, names, payment logs. What the hell is this? Rai muttered. This, I said, turning to face them, is every expense covered by the Arlo Fund in the last 5 years. They stared. Morgan slowly slid off her stool. I swiped left. The next slide showed a pie chart labeled total contributions, every deposit from my account to the fund, dates, amounts, confirmation numbers, all traceable. Then I said it. I'm the fund manager. Always have been. Silence. Not shocked silence. Something worse, a kind of stunned, hollow blankness, like they couldn't quite process it yet. I've covered your rent, your utilities, the travel for Callum's 3 residencies, Morgan's entire clay budget, Lena's entire show last year in Boulder, Rai's broken laptop and the shipping fees for that emergency art grant application you submitted late. I tapped again. More receipts. Every cent came through me, either through what Arlo left, or from my own account, because he asked me to keep it going, quietly, so I did. Lena blinked fast. That's not, what? You're lying, Callum said, his voice low, almost rehearsed. You don't have that kind of money. I raised an eyebrow. You think tattoos don't pay? Real ones, I mean, not the free infinity symbols Morgan gives to tourists. Morgan flinched. Rai took a step back like the wall was shifting behind him. Why wouldn't you just tell us? Because you didn't want to know, I said, stepping closer. You wanted a faceless patron, some invisible bank that never said no. You liked pretending you earned this life. The projector whirred softly. On the screen behind me, a transfer log showing over $297,000 in total support. Nearly 300 grand, I said. I sold my old studio, gave up my own work, and you thought I was the poor hanger-on. Callum's arms dropped to his sides. So this meeting, you brought us here to shame us? No, I said. I brought you here to end it. Another tap. A final slide. Fun dissolution in progress. Lena stepped forward, her voice wobbling. You're sabotaging this out of jealousy. I turned the tablet toward her, showing the termination letter with her name on it. No, I'm cleaning it up. Morgan sat down, hard, on the edge of the kiln platform and buried her face in her hands. This can't be real, Rai said. You're not doing this. We're a community. I looked at him. You toasted to a fake donor while mocking the person who paid for your wine. He opened his mouth, closed it. I unplugged the tablet and let the screen go dark. This place was supposed to honor Arlo, I said quietly, but it's become a vanity project for people who forgot how to say thank you. And just like that, the silence became unbearable. They weren't artists. Not in that moment. They were just people who finally realized the floor they stood on was never theirs to begin with. I opened the door to find Lena standing on my porch, arms crossed over her chest like she was cold, even though she was still wearing that long camel coat she only brought out when she wanted to seem serious. Can we talk? I let her in, not because I wanted to, but because I was curious how long it would take her to pivot from outrage to regret. She stood awkwardly in my living room, eyes skating over the cheap folding table I used as a desk, the worn-out couch, the chipped mugs on the shelf. I didn't know, she said finally. I mean, we all just assumed. You didn't want to know. I cut in. She flinched but nodded. I guess. Silence stretched. I let it. I talked to Callum, she continued. He's trying to reach out to one of the gallery directors. He says we might be able to salvage the winter show if we figure something out with the funding. There is no more funding, I said. The fund's being dissolved. The remaining balance is going to arts education for the local elementary schools. Her face twitched like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered, Are you really not going to reconsider? No. She hesitated a beat, like she was deciding whether to drop the mask. Then her voice broke, just a little. We built something together. No, I said calmly. I built it. You all just decorated the windows. She left without another word. That afternoon, I got an email from Morgan. Subject, I'm sorry. I didn't know how much you were carrying. I'm embarrassed. I should have paid attention. Please let me know if there's any way I can help moving forward, even if it's not with the studio. I understand if you're done with us. But I'm not done growing. It was the only message that didn't make me angry. 2 hours later, Rai posted a story on his social media that said, Funny how some people act like martyrs after stealing the spotlight. He followed it up with a screenshot of the gallery wall, captioned, Never needed her. Never will. I didn't respond. By evening, I'd sent out the final termination letters. All legal, all binding, co-signed by Raymond Jennings and timestamped with every necessary document attached. Callum messaged me a single line, You'll hear from our lawyer. I forwarded it to Raymond with a subject line that just read, LOL. There was nothing they could do. No loopholes. No appeals. For once, I had the upper hand, and not because I wanted revenge. Not even because I was angry, but because I was finally, unmistakably done. The cabin sat at the edge of the ridge, where the gravel turned to pine needles and the wind always carried the faint scent of snow. Arlo's old place. It had been empty for years, stripped bare after he died, left to sag under the weight of broken windows and time, until I came back. I'd been working on it quietly for months. Late nights, early mornings, scraping paint, sanding floors, hauling buckets of drywall compound up the winding path from town. My hands were calloused in a different way now. Not from needles and ink, from building something that finally felt like mine. The front room had once been a studio. Now, it was something else entirely. Clean tables. Open shelves lined with art supplies. Blank sketchpads stacked in milk crates. Sunlight poured in through freshly washed windows and landed on rows of tiny chairs I'd picked up from the elementary school's storage closet. The sign I hung near the door read, Hollow Pine Arts, free weekend classes for local kids. No donors. No applications. Just paper, paint, and time. On the far wall, I had installed a mural, something new, something mine. It showed a figure standing in the shadows, surrounded by loud, colorful shapes. The figure was small, barely visible, almost forgotten. The title, painted in a quiet serif font in the corner, unseen. I stood there that morning, hands on my hips, staring at it longer than I needed to. It wasn't perfect. The lighting was uneven. One of the chairs still wobbled, but it was real. And it wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. Later that afternoon, I pulled out my phone and unfollowed them all. Lena, Callum, Morgan, even Rye. Gone. Not blocked. Just removed. Then I deleted their numbers. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I didn't want to give myself the chance to go backward. They could keep their curated posts and their clinking wine glasses. I had kids arriving tomorrow. Kids who didn't care about gallery openings or artist statements. Kids who just wanted to draw. I stepped outside and locked the cabin behind me. The sun was starting to drop behind the tree line, casting everything in that strange, amber glow that only happens when the day's almost done. I stood there a moment, breathing in the pine. Then I walked back to my truck, old, dented, reliable. I slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and let the engine rumble to life. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I was finally just living. The truck creaked as I climbed onto the hood, sketchpad in hand, pen already uncapped. The metal was still warm from the sun. I leaned back against the windshield and looked out at the mountains, the sky bleeding orange and gold behind them. It was the kind of view you could miss if you were too busy chasing something shinier. I started to draw, nothing fancy, just loose outlines of trees and rooftops, the curve of the valley, the hint of clouds stretching above the peaks. My hand moved slowly, unhurried, the way it used to when I was still learning. Back before I ever charged a dime. A faint laugh caught my ear. Down the hill, near the cabin's porch, Morgan stood with a little girl, maybe 7, maybe 8, who was smearing blue paint across a canvas twice her size. They were both covered in streaks of color. Morgan's hair was tied up in a messy knot, and her cheeks were pink from the cold. She wasn't crying this time. She wasn't apologizing, just helping. I watched as the girl held up her brush for approval, and Morgan gave her a proud little nod. Not performative, not for an audience, just real. Then they both went back to painting. I didn't wave, didn't call out. I just smiled to myself and looked back at the mountains. There were no texts buzzing, no missed calls, no one demanding an explanation or a refund or a slice of credit they never earned. Just quiet. The kind that comes after a storm, when the air feels lighter and the ground finally starts to dry out. I flipped to a new page in the sketchbook, started something new, not for a show, not for money, not for anyone else's approval, just because I wanted to. And for the first time in years, I felt it, not pride, not victory, not even relief, just peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done.